When I was a teenager, my life changed dramatically. My parents died in a car accident, leaving me completely alone. I spent several years in an orphanage until one day I was adopted by Mr. and Mrs. Walker. They became my new parents, and I immediately felt like part of their family. On my first day in the new home, I met Emily, their daughter. She was 21 years old, 3 years older than me. Her long brown hair and deep brown eyes immediately caught my attention. But it wasn't just her looks that struck me. There was an inner strength and confidence in her that fascinated me. "Emily, this is Michael. He will be living with us," Mrs. Walker introduced me. Emily just nodded and went to her room. I felt awkward but understood that she needed time to get used to me. Weeks passed, and I tried to find a way to connect with Emily. I often asked her about her interests, studies, friends, but only got short and dry answers in return. However, I didn't give up. Every day I tried to find a way to get closer to her, hoping that one day the ice between us would melt. My new parents were happy to see me trying to become part of their family. Mr. Walker often talked to me about his work projects, and Mrs. Walker treated me to her culinary masterpieces. Their home became a real haven for me, and I was grateful for that. But despite all this, I couldn't shake the feeling that Emily still didn't accept me. Her cold attitude sometimes made me feel unwelcome. However, I understood that a real family takes time and effort. I was determined not to give up and continue trying to build a relationship with her. After all, I knew that true closeness takes time and patience. Emily kept me at a distance. Her indifference and sometimes even contempt were incomprehensible to me. Her cold gaze and brief answers to my questions left me perplexed. It seemed that every step I took to get closer to her only widened the gap between us. One day, I decided to approach her from a different angle. Noticing that she often read books in the garden, I approached her with a book I had long wanted to read. "What are you reading?" I asked, trying to sound interested. Emily looked up from her book and glanced at me with irritation. "Why do you care?" she replied dryly and returned to her reading. I felt my efforts crumble, but I didn't give up. "I just thought we might have common interests," I said, smiling, hoping she would soften. Emily sighed and closed her book. "Look, Michael, I understand you want to connect, but I'm used to a different life. I need time." Her voice was firm, but there was a hint of understanding in it. I nodded, realizing her words were sincere. "Okay, I'll give you time," I said and stepped back, leaving her alone with her book. Weeks passed, and I continued to look for ways to get closer to Emily. I helped around the house, tried to be useful in any activities that might interest her. Sometimes it seemed that the ice was starting to melt, but the next moment she would close off again. One evening, when our parents went to visit friends, I decided to cook dinner. I knew Emily loved pasta, so I decided to make her favorite dish. When she walked into the kitchen and saw me cooking, there was a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "Are you cooking?" she asked with disbelief. "Yes, I thought you might be hungry," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Maybe we could have dinner together." Emily was silent for a while, then nodded. We sat at the table, and this time the conversation flowed more easily. We talked about trivial things, her studies, and how I was adjusting to my new life. I felt that the first spark of understanding had appeared between us. However, after dinner, she closed off again. She thanked me for dinner and went to her room. I understood that our path to getting closer would be long and difficult, but that evening gave me hope. I knew that slowly but surely, I would find a way to her heart. It was a typical Friday evening, and I was working on a project in my room. Suddenly, I heard the front door slam open. I rushed into the hallway and saw Emily. Her face was streaked with tears, makeup smudged, and her hair disheveled. I immediately ran to her. "Emily, what happened?" I asked, alarmed. She looked at me with pain and anger in her eyes. "It's none of your business, Michael," she snapped, trying to walk past me. But I didn't let her. "Emily, Please, tell me. I want to help." I looked into her eyes, and I saw doubt flicker there. Finally, she gave in and began to speak. Her date with a guy from the university hadn't gone as planned. He turned out to be arrogant and pushy, trying to kiss her without her consent. At that moment, I felt an indescribable fury boiling inside me. "Where is this guy? He deserves a lesson," I said, ready to act. "Don't, Michael. I already walked away from him. I just want to forget this evening," she replied, still sobbing. I led her to the living room and made her sit on the couch. Awkwardly, I made her a cup of tea and sat next to her. We talked for hours. Emily shared how she had been deceived by the superficial charm and popularity of this guy. I listened, trying to console her. That night, I saw her vulnerability for the first time. Our conversation lasted until dawn, and eventually, we both fell asleep on the couch. When I woke up, I realized that something had changed between us. There was a sense of closeness that hadn't been there before, and I was glad for it. Our parents noticed our growing camaraderie and were pleased. Harmony and happiness reigned in the house like never before. Emily and I started spending more time together. Anyone might have thought we had become a real family, but in reality, there was something more growing between us. It was a Saturday, a day off, and I was working on my project in my room again. Suddenly, I heard a soft knock on the door. Opening it, I saw Emily standing on the threshold, holding a chessboard in her hands. "Do you want to play chess?" she asked, with a slight smile. I was surprised, but agreed. We settled on the carpet in my room and began the game. From the very first moves, I noticed how gracefully she handled the chess pieces with her slender fingers. She gently stroked them up and down as if contemplating each move. Her eyes sparkled with interest and playfulness, and her lips were slightly bitten as she made the next move. Every time she looked at me, I felt my heart race. Her presence was mesmerizing. I tried to concentrate on the chess game, but all my thoughts were only about her. Emily made her moves with remarkable confidence. Her fingers glided over the pieces, giving each of them special meaning. I noticed how she occasionally looked into my eyes, and each of her glances stirred strong emotions within me. She noticed my embarrassment and smiled even wider. When she checkmated me, I realized that I couldn't win this game because all my attention was focused on her graceful movements and captivating gaze. I tried to hide the tension in my pants with something, but it was unsuccessful. Emily noticed my discomfort, and her smile became even warmer. "It looks like you lost, Michael," she said with a smile, putting the chess pieces back on the board. "But don't worry, maybe you'll have better luck next time." She stood up, and I watched her as she walked to the door. My gaze dropped to her very short shorts, and at that moment, she turned around. Noticing where I was looking, Emily winked at me and laughed. I felt myself blush, but smiled back. A week had passed since that evening with the chess game, but I couldn't get the image of Emily out of my mind. Her playful glance, her graceful movements, all of it made my heart race. I tried to focus on my studies and household chores, but thoughts of her kept coming back. Emily behaved as if nothing had happened. She was as distant and cold as before. This only fueled my feelings and made me wonder if I had imagined it all. One evening, when our parents were out for dinner with friends, Emily got ready for another date. She looked stunning in a tight-fitting dress and perfectly styled hair. I felt a pang of jealousy but tried not to show it. "Have a good evening," I said as she passed me on her way to the door. She nodded without stopping and left. All evening, I couldn't find peace, thinking about how she was spending time with another guy. I tried to keep myself busy, but it didn't help. Late at night, I heard the front door quietly open. Emily was back. I assumed she would go straight to her room, but instead, I heard her footsteps heading to the living room. My curiosity got the better of me, and I quietly left my room. Peeking into the living room, I saw Emily sitting on the couch with her phone in hand. She seemed agitated, and her fingers were rapidly typing messages. I didn't want to eavesdrop, but something compelled me to stay. I noticed she had left her laptop on the coffee table. When she went to the bathroom, I took the opportunity and approached the laptop. It was open to her email, and I saw a conversation with the guy she had gone on a date with. At first, I felt guilty reading her private messages, but then my eyes caught the word nymphomaniac. My hands trembled as I continued reading. It turned out Emily had confessed to this guy about her sexual addiction. It was a shocking discovery, but somehow it only intensified my attraction to her. Returning to my room, I tried to process everything I had learned. Emily was a nymphomaniac, which explained a lot about her behavior. At the same time, I felt my heart race at the thought that this discovery could change our relationship. When she came back from the bathroom, I was already in my room. That night, I lay awake for a long time, contemplating what I had learned. My attraction to Emily grew even stronger, and I knew I now had a secret I couldn't share with anyone. One evening, when our parents were at a dinner party, I heard the front door slam open. Emily burst into the house, her face streaked with tears. Her date, who had driven her home, was clearly trying to calm her down, but Emily pushed him away. "I never want to see you again!" she shouted, stepping out of the car and slamming the door in his face. I immediately stepped out onto the porch to see what was going on. Emily's date quickly drove off, leaving her alone. She stood there with her head down, crying. I approached her and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Emily, what happened?" I asked, with genuine concern. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with pain and anger. "Michael, it's none of your business," she replied sharply, but her voice was trembling. "Please, tell me," I continued, looking directly into her eyes. "I want to help." Emily sighed, clearly deciding whether or not to tell me everything. Finally, she gave in and began to speak. "That guy, he tried to make me do something I didn't want to." Her voice was quiet and full of pain. "I thought he was different, but he turned out to be just like all the others." I felt a boiling rage inside me. "Emily, that's horrible. You don't deserve to be treated like that." She nodded and sat down on the porch steps. I sat next to her, and she continued to talk about her evening, all the unpleasant moments, and how she felt betrayed and alone. When her tears finally stopped, she took a deep breath and looked at me. "Michael, I need to tell you something." I looked at her, waiting for her to continue. Emily was silent for a long time, gathering her thoughts before she finally spoke. "The reason I've been avoiding you all this time, it's my addiction," she confessed, avoiding my gaze. "I'm a nymphomaniac. I can't control my desires, and it scared me. I was afraid that if we got close, I wouldn't be able to hold back." Her confession shocked me, but it explained a lot. "Emily, that doesn't make you a bad person. You shouldn't blame yourself for something you can't control." She looked into my eyes, and there was something new in her gaze, a mix of fear and hope. "I know, Michael, but it's also wrong because you're my stepbrother. We shouldn't have such close contact." Suddenly, she reached out and grabbed me below the waist. I felt my body tense up, and she whispered, "I see our desires are mutual." I didn't have time to say anything before she lightly kissed me on the lips. Her kiss was short, but full of emotion. She pulled away and, winking, said, "Let's keep this our little secret. We'll see each other again." With that, she stood up and left, leaving me sitting on the steps in complete confusion and arousal. Her touch and kiss burned on my skin, and I knew that this moment would change everything between us. Late at night, I was deep in sleep, lost in sweet dreams, when suddenly I felt something strange. I was awakened by soft movements under the blanket, immediately accompanied by a feeling of incredible pleasure. I opened my eyes, trying to understand what was happening, and my heart started racing. Lifting the blanket, I saw Emily. Her long hair was spread across my thighs, and her lips were touching my skin. I was in shock, but I couldn't take my eyes off her actions. She looked up at me, and I read a plea for silence in her eyes. Placing a finger on her lips, she continued. Her movements were graceful and confident. She used her tongue and lips with such masterful tenderness that I could hardly hold back a moan. I felt her wet lips glide over my skin, the sound of her suckling filling the room with forbidden passion. My hands instinctively reached for her hair. I began to stroke her soft strands, feeling their silky texture between my fingers. Emily lay on my lap and started sucking my finger, moaning softly. These sounds heightened my arousal to the limit. She continued with even more effort, and I felt my body begin to tremble with pleasure. Her tongue and lips worked with such fervor that I couldn't hold back any longer. A wave of ecstasy overwhelmed me, and I exploded like a volcano. My ears rang, and for a moment I lost touch with reality. When I opened my eyes again, Emily had already risen and was leaving. I couldn't believe what had just happened. She simply left without saying a word. Under the moonlight, I saw her silhouette, her beautiful figure disappearing into the darkness of the hallway. Emily finished, quietly got up, and left the room without saying a word. I was in complete confusion, trying to process what had just happened. Her actions left me in a state of shock and arousal. That night I couldn't sleep, pondering what it meant. Then came the second night. I was lying in bed again, trying to sleep, when I heard quiet footsteps outside the door. The door slowly creaked open, and Emily entered the room. My heart raced as I saw her silhouette in the moonlight. She approached me without saying a word and leaned down to kiss me. It was our first kiss, filled with passion and tenderness. Her lips were soft and warm, and I felt my body respond to her touch. Emily gently straddled me, her movements graceful and confident. I felt the wetness she exuded, and it only heightened my arousal. Her hands wrapped around my neck, and she began to move, creating a strong friction. I didn't even notice how I slipped inside her, but her moan indicated that it had happened. She began to move with more passion, and I felt her body respond to my movements. Her warmth enveloped me, and each of her moans intensified my pleasure. Her rhythm was impeccable, and I savored every moment of this intimate act. Emily held me tighter, her breathing becoming more ragged. I felt her enjoying every movement, which aroused me even more. Her body trembled with pleasure, and I couldn't hold back any longer. A wave of ecstasy overwhelmed me, and I exploded inside her, feeling her body respond to my orgasm. At that moment, as if by magic, I heard Mother's voice in the hallway. "Emily, where are you? Why aren't you in your room?" Emily started, and I saw her expression change. She quickly got off me, her breathing heavy and ragged. "Now, this will be our big secret," she whispered, winking at me, and quickly left the room. I lay in bed, savoring and marveling at what had happened. A few minutes later, I heard Emily talking to our mother in the hallway. "I was just talking to Michael, Mom," she said, her voice calm. "We lost track of time." Mother suspected nothing. "Okay, but you should go back to your room. It's late." "Yes, Mom," Emily replied, and I heard her footsteps head back to her room. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, unable to believe what had happened. This night had forever changed our relationship, and now we had our big secret. Our relationship with Emily had become something secret, forbidden, and incredibly exciting at the same time. We continued to meet, but now it happened much more often and in the most risky places. Emily, with her nymphomania, couldn't resist coming to me several times a day. Every time she came to my college, we found secluded spots where we could be alone. These were places like empty classrooms, storage rooms, and even parking lots. The adrenaline from the risk of being caught made our encounters even more thrilling. Emily started coming to me every night. She couldn't resist her desires, and I felt she needed this as much as I did. But our nightly meetings began to arouse suspicion in our parents. To avoid being discovered, we decided to buy a gag for Emily. Her loud moans could give us away, and it was too risky. Every night, when our parents went to bed, I waited to hear the quiet footsteps outside the door. Emily would enter my room, and we would indulge in our secret pleasures. She wore the gag to muffle her moans, and it added even more forbidden excitement to our interactions. We continued to explore each other, deepening our bond. Emily became not only a passionate lover, but also a true friend and partner to me. We supported each other in everything, sharing our worries and dreams. The joy from our meetings was incredible, but along with it came difficulties. Every time we were together, I felt the tension from the fear of being caught. Our secret encounters were risky, and it added adrenaline, but also caused concern. However, despite all the difficulties, our relationship grew stronger. We learned to find joy in every moment we spent together. Emily supported me in all my endeavors, and I was there for her when she needed it. Our bond deepened with each passing day, and I realized that she had become indispensable to me. We continued to meet in secret, enjoying every moment we could spend together. It was our secret, our forbidden passion, that we cherished and kept. Our secret meetings with Emily became increasingly risky, and with each day, the fear of being discovered grew. Our parents started noticing strange things: Emily disappearing at night, my constant sleepy appearance, and sometimes even odd noises coming from my room. We understood that continuing to hide could lead to disaster. One evening, when our parents came home earlier than usual, Emily and I were in my room. Her loud moans were muffled by the gag, but the sounds of our movements were unmistakable. We didn't hear them enter the house, and it wasn't until my mother approached my room and knocked on the door that we realized how close we were to being caught. "Michael, are you in there?" she asked, and I felt my heart stop. "Yes, Mom, I'm just reading," I replied, trying to sound calm, but my voice betrayed my anxiety. "Okay, dinner's ready," she said, walking away, and we both sighed with relief. It was too close. We realized we couldn't continue like this without risking being caught. The instances where we were almost discovered had become too frequent, and the fear of exposure began to taint all our encounters. The next day, we met in the park, where we could talk without the risk of being overheard. Emily looked worried, and I understood her concern. "Michael, we can't keep doing this," she said, looking into my eyes. "It's too dangerous. We have to stop meeting, at least for a while." I knew she was right, but it was hard. We both needed each other, and the thought of separation was unbearable. But for the sake of our love and safety, we decided to keep our secret and temporarily stop our contacts. "You're right, Emily," I said, taking her hand. "We need to be careful, but know that I'll always be here for you, no matter what." She nodded, and we hugged, feeling our hearts beat in unison. The decision was made, and we understood it was a temporary measure. Our feelings for each other were too strong to forget. We decided to meet only when we were sure it was safe. It was hard, but necessary. We knew that for the sake of our love and future, we had to be careful and patient. Our secret meetings with Emily ceased, but our feelings for each other remained just as strong. We understood that we needed to support each other in our studies and careers to build our future. Every morning, we met in the kitchen, where we had breakfast together and discussed our plans for the day. Emily continued her studies at the university, preparing for her final exams. I helped her with her studies, explaining difficult topics and spending hours with her in preparation. She was grateful for my help, and often said that it would be much harder without me. I, too, kept up with my studies. My focus was on projects and exams, and Emily supported me, motivating me to achieve better results. We shared our successes and failures, which strengthened our bond. One evening, sitting on the veranda, we decided to discuss our future. The summer breeze caressed our faces, and the stars shone brightly in the night sky. We talked about our dreams and plans, about how we wanted to build our lives. "Michael, I want to become a lawyer," Emily said, looking at me with confidence in her eyes. "I want to help people and fight for justice." "That's wonderful, Emily," I replied. "And I dream of becoming an engineer and developing new technologies. We can support each other in this." We smiled at each other, understanding that our dreams and goals complemented each other. We knew we would be there for each other, despite all the difficulties and obstacles. Discussing our future, we also touched on the subject of our relationship. We understood that sooner or later, we would have to tell our parents the truth. It was a difficult decision, but we knew that honesty was the foundation of strong relationships. "Someday, we'll tell them everything," I said, holding Emily's hand. "We need to give them time to understand and accept our love." "Yes, Michael," she agreed. "But for now, let's be careful and patient. We can handle it." Our conversations about the future filled us with hope for a happy ending. We knew that together we could overcome all the difficulties and build the life we dreamed of. Our feelings for each other were sincere and deep, and we believed that love would help us overcome any trials. We continued to support each other, building our future step by step. We knew that there was a lot of work and effort ahead of us, but we were ready to go together, hand in hand. Our path was difficult, but we were confident that together we could overcome all obstacles and achieve our goals.